You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, we're giving you the Michigan Sports Truth Week in Review, the show that reveals facts, truth, research, and statistics and never messes around. We lay down the entire truth about everything regarding your Detroit and Michigan sports teams, no matter if it's good or bad. No junk, no entertainment, no homerism, no coddling, no pop culture, no opinions, no shilling, and no fluff. Head over to our website at MichiganSportsTruth.com and like our Facebook page, The Michigan Sports Truth. The hosts of the Michigan Sports Truth podcast do not take any suggestions or criticism from any member of its audience on how it should be run. It is up to the host to decide what they want to cover. They also do not intend to be any amount of popular in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Additionally, the views of the audience, right or wrong, do not reflect the actual truth revealed on this program.
And welcome to episode 305 of the Michigan Sports Truth Week in Review segment of the podcast. Episode 305 in session. Taylor Phillips and Buck Geno. Just plenty to recap. A few topics to discuss, including Bridges, Mrazek, and Datsyuk and Liriano. First of all, we're going to get to the Spartans here.
Valentine for the win!
An easy win at home over the Illinois Fighting Illini, 81-61, which clinches them at least a share of the Big Ten title with the Ohio State Buckeyes, and then they clinch the outright Big Ten title with the 68-63 win at the Wisconsin Badgers in Madison at Kohl Center. So, in that game, prior to that game, Miles Bridges was cleared to play at Wisconsin. And granted, he was one of the 25 guys linked to the FBI probe incident with the NCAA, but he was cleared to play and hope today and he was hoping to be cleared to play out the Big Ten tournament and the NCAA tournament for a different reason, and that'd be a personal family reason. That would be that was according to ESPN. It's headlining. He's confident he'll be able to play. He would still have to hope. He said, from Dan Murphy wrote in the second paragraph, Bridges said he was nervous that he could miss Sunday's game after reports this week indicated that his mother may have received money from a man associated with professional basketball agent Andy Miller. Bridges spoke to a school compliance officer after those reports surfaced. He found out Saturday afternoon that he would be allowed to play. So I guess we would assume he would be allowed to play too, but we'd still have to get the official word.
Yeah, I mean, he was cleared to play today. There's not really a whole lot inclination that he'll be suspended or otherwise unable to play throughout the rest of the season unless something else comes up that nobody knows about right now. I don't think that there's a whole lot there as far as Miles Bridges is concerned. It really has to do more with the Michigan State basketball program at this point. Miles Bridges' name got on there because of an interaction between Dawkins and Miles Bridges' mother regarding some money. So there wasn't something that I think that Miles Bridges would have had to be that worried about. Obviously, it's something that weighs on his mind because you never know in those situations when it comes to the NCAA what they're actually going to do. That said, I really don't see any reason for him to not play in any of the games that they have remaining on their schedule, whether it be the Big Ten tournament or the NCAA tournament. I really think that there's a lot of people making more about this than what needs to be when it comes to Michigan State. There's some questions that need to be answered, but those are going to be pretty easy answers if you're not doing anything wrong. So, with all of that being said, it's a tough time for Michigan State with all the other things going on. And I think that with this report coming out has been really brought into the question of, does this have anything to do with the other? No, it doesn't. But it just is more things for people to write about and for people to speculate on. This big Yahoo Sports report that's come out piecemeal, little by little, as more is released. When your names show up in those type of things, you kind of have to move quickly to find out if it is indeed something that you need to worry about. I think Michigan State has done its due diligence. There are some questions that need to be answered, as in why are their names popping up on the report? Why are their names there? And what were the reasons behind it? But it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of evidence that would say that Michigan State was involved in any illegal activity to this point from what we know. So unless something else happens in that report and in that investigation, then I think that Michigan State's going to be in the clear on that end. I still think they have some things to answer as far as the other end of the investigation when it comes to sexual assault and Adrian Payne, Travis Walton, and those types of guys, and why those things that happened back in 2010 did. Those are some of the questions that I think are going to need to be answered more than, did Miles Bridges' mom take $400? One of the cases in point that I brought up was Cam Newton. Cam Newton, when he was at Auburn, was brought under some investigation because his dad illegally took some money from different schools, one including Mississippi State, that didn't have anything to do with Cam Newton attending Auburn or his playing. But it's one of those things that you have to go through that process, find out who knew what and when. And I think that in this case, this is pretty much the same as what Cam Newton went through, which is Miles Bridges wasn't at the meeting. Miles Bridges had no knowledge of this. And when it comes to why her name and Miles Bridges' name were on there, there's a lot of questions as to what that money actually was for, why it was given to her, how much was it. There's all those questions that have been brought up in the wake of this investigation. Really to say any more succinctly than that is, I just don't think that there's anything for Michigan State fans to worry about here, other than if Tom Izzo comes out and Dwayne Stevens comes out and said, yes, we had contacts with these individuals. It didn't have anything to do with any recruitment of any of the current basketball players, nor any of the other players playing for other universities that receive benefits. I don't think there's anybody from Michigan State that's handing out benefits. So it really just has to do with the guy that's trying to make a name for himself in Dawkins and putting some of these items on the ledger. People fail to see sometimes all of the things that go into those types of investigations. They're not investigating Michigan State. They're not investigating certain schools per se. They're investigating the contact that this agent and this company had with various student athletes and what benefits were given and why and when. So there's a lot of people that are going to have to come up with some answers, but I just think that Michigan State's in the clear on this one, and they have some other problems that they have to address, but I don't think this is going to be one of them. And one more thing to say about this, there are going to be some people, including Sean Miller, who probably aren't going to have a job after this season and probably won't have a job ever in NCAA basketball again. with regards to these actions, but I don't think Michigan State is going to be in that category simply by the information that we have now.
Right. So this is all the information that tells you that Miles Bridges is probably going to play in the Big Ten tournament and the NCAA tournament as well. So, that being said, can't wait for the Big Ten tournament tomorrow. But let's not forget those Michigan Wolverines.
For three, yes, sir.
They beat the Penn State Nittany Lions 72-63 in State College, Pennsylvania, in Happy Valley. Then they went into Maryland, 85-61, a very easy win over the Terrapins to wrap up their regular season.
Yeah, a good performance at Penn State. Penn State, a team that was really, and it still is, fighting for its tournament lives. And it's going to be a long shot for them to get in. If they would have beaten Michigan on their home floor, that would have been a feather in their cap. And it would have been a good win for them and enhanced their profile. Alas, they lose that game, and then they end up losing the next game as well. So it was a good win for Michigan, and then they go into Maryland, and they just throttle the Terrapins and Mark Turgeon at home, up by 30 after one half of basketball, and that was pretty much all she wrote. One thing I will say is Michigan defensively has looked very good in the last couple of weeks, and that's something that if you're going to make a long tournament run, you can be playing offense very well, but when you get to the NCAA tournament and have those short turnaround times, the key is going to be on the defensive end. Can you stop the other teams from doing what they want to do? And right now, Michigan, over the last 2 weeks, has been able to do so with relative effectiveness. And that's something to watch for, especially in the Big Ten tournament when you have one-day turnarounds. And if you look at the Big Ten bracket, Michigan gets a bye into the second round. The first round is the bottom feeders, so to speak, of the Big Ten. They'll play the winner of the Iowa-Illinois matchup on Wednesday. And then, barring anything strange, they should move on to play Nebraska in the quarterfinals on Friday. That'll be a tough test for Michigan, simply because the only time they played Nebraska this year was at Nebraska, and they just got destroyed at Pinnacle Bank Arena by the Cornhuskers. So some revenge on the mind of the Michigan Wolverines there. And if they're able to win that game, by all means, I think they'll be playing Michigan State in the semifinals. So the road to the Big Ten finals does go through Michigan State for Michigan, and they will be able to avoid them for 2 games, and they will not meet until the semifinals. I think that if you're looking at the field, I think that's how it's going to fall. I don't think Nebraska is going to be able to beat Michigan the way they're playing now. They're playing a completely different team back in January when Michigan lost to them. They were in the midst of a very tough stretch with short turnarounds and a long road trip. That's not going to be the case here. Michigan is going to be well rested, especially if they can get out big early on Iowa or Illinois. They can rest a lot of their starters and go into the bench and make sure they have a fresh unit for that game on Friday. So it'll be an interesting bracket here in the Big Ten, to say the least. A lot of interesting games are going to be coming up. If Penn State can beat Northwestern, they will match up against Ohio State, who they have beaten this year earlier. And then Purdue will play the winner of Indiana and the winner of the Rutgers-Minnesota game. So whoever wins that 6-11 game will play Purdue on Friday in the late game. So Big Ten right now, that tournament looks like it's going to go pretty close to chalk. But when it comes to tournament time, all it takes is one team to blow up those brackets, and we'll see what happens in that Big Ten basketball tournament at Madison Square Garden.
Shifting over to the MAC, the Central Michigan Chippewas lose a very good one in Kalamazoo, 83-81 in overtime. And then they go into Toledo, still the best team in the MAC West. They lose 89-76 by 13. They're home against the Ball State Cardinals Tuesday at 7, and then the rematch in McGurk against the Western Michigan Broncos Friday at 7. That wraps up the MAC regular season. The Western Michigan Broncos. Back to the Toledo game for CMU. Josh Kozinski went back to scoring 0 points again. Wow. Western Michigan also went into Ball State and beat the Cardinals 87-80. I watched some of the game at Buffalo Wild Wings in Mount Pleasant. They played really good, a little bit of good defense in the end, and they came up with a 7-point win. They provided enough offense too. They're home against the Eastern Michigan Eagles Tuesday at 7 before the rematch at McGurk. The Eastern Michigan Eagles went into Toledo and beat the Rockets by 6, 85-79, and then they crushed the last place Northern Illinois Huskies. Both games at home, 82-53. They're in Kalamazoo Tuesday at 7, and then they're at Toledo for the rematch Friday at 7 against those Rockets. So CMU in 5th place, Western Michigan 4th place, Eastern in 3rd place in the MAC West.
Yeah, it's all about jockeying for position. MAC is going to go a little bit longer, and they're going to play next week. There will be their regular season finales next week, and then they'll go into tournament play the following week. So a lot of tiebreakers, a lot of games yet to be played. So it'll be interesting to see who gets seeded where. I don't know if any of those teams really have a chance to make a run. The MAC tournament is a little bit different in that the first round games are played at campus sites, and then they move to Quicken Loans Arena for quarterfinal play onward. But right now, Western, Eastern, and Central all packed tightly together in that MAC West. And Eastern, with 2 big games this week, probably has the best chance of either A, holding serve or maybe even moving up a little bit with games against Western and Toledo, and Central also having a game against Western for their regular season finale on March 2nd. So it'll be very interesting to see how these 3 teams fare, and we'll see where they get seeded for that MAC tournament coming up in 2 weeks.
You got it. We'll see what happens. Shifting from college basketball to pro basketball, and the Pistons.
Left sideline 3, and he answers.
They returned from their NBA All-Star break and lack defense as usual. They lose to the Boston Celtics 110-98. Celtics out-defended the Pistons there, and then they went into Charlotte and got outplayed by the Hornets 114-98 at Time Warner Cable Arena earlier this afternoon on Sunday. Pistons now, I believe, 2.5 games out of the 8th and final playoff spot in the Eastern Conference as I check the standings on NBA.com.
Yeah, they're 28-31, and they are indeed 2.5 games back of that final playoff spot. They're 2.5 back of the Heat, who have a winning record at 31-29. The Pistons just got flat out embarrassed by the Hornets today. It was not even close. They made it a little bit closer in the fourth quarter with garbage time, but that was a 26-point game after 3 quarters, and it wasn't even that close. Just a really bad effort by the Pistons, especially from a team that's right below them in the Hornets. And even though the Hornets are on the outside looking in, that's a game that you have to be able to win if you're the Pistons, or at least show up. Maybe you don't have to play great, but boy, you can't play like that. And then, as you mentioned, them losing to the Celtics off the All-Star break, the new car smell is off of the Blake Griffin trade, and the Pistons are back to their ways as far as defensively breaking down, giving up 110 plus in both of their games this week, and not scoring 100 in either one of them. So they're going to have to fix some things. They're not out of it, but again, it's just one of those things that the Pistons, at the most critical time, are starting to have their faults resurface. And with no Reggie Jackson in sight, the front court defense has been pretty atrocious, and the backcourt defense has been pretty atrocious. The front court defense not much better, and right now there's a lot of question as to whether St. Van Gundy can survive this non-playoff run if they're not able to make the playoffs. I don't know if he's going to get fired. The problem is that you look at their roster that they have, they went all in with that trade for Blake Griffin, and they really don't have anything to show for it in the standings. When they made that trade, they made a little bit of a mini run, went 5-0, but since then they've played mediocre basketball, and they're kind of back right where they started from, which is behind the Heat for that 8th seed. And the Heat are playing just about what their record is. They're going to be a mediocre team down the middle. And right now they're a game and a half ahead of the Pistons. Pistons are going to have to turn it up defensively because you can't be giving up that many points and expecting to win ball games. And they're going to have to get something fixed on that end. I don't know if they have it in them to do that. And it's going to be really a lot of questions to be answered in the offseason if they don't make the playoffs, because with that trade of Blake Griffin, they don't have a first-round pick in this year's draft unless the Clippers hit the lottery, which doesn't look to be likely. And so they're not going to have a first-round pick to draw from. And if that is the case, then they're going to have to make their bones in free agency and making some trades, and they're going to have some hard decisions to make. And it's going to be a real long offseason for Sam Van Gundy and the gang if they don't make the playoffs. So if they can right the ship, that would be great. But then you have to wonder at this point, at what cost is that going to come at? Because if they somehow meander their way into the playoffs, they're going to be playing either the Celtics or the Raptors in most likelihood. And those are two teams that they have not played well against over the balance of the season. The Raptors especially.
Yeah, that's just the way it is. The Pistons scoring exactly 98 points in their last 2 losses, and they're 1-5 since the Nelson and James Ennis trades, which really don't set well for the Pistons at all. They just got to play better, and they have no backup center. But more importantly, they lack defense. Period.
Yeah, I saw a report today that Eric Moreland is expected to get more minutes in the backup center role.
Oh.
Don't know what that's going to really do for you.
Nothing.
He's not an offensive threat, and defensively he's proven to be average at best. So they're right now grasping at straws, and I just don't know if they have enough to make it in the playoffs. What they're really counting on at this point, if they're going to continue to play this way, is for the Heat to just fall on their face and give them the 8th spot. And that's no way to get into the playoffs, is waiting for another team to play poorly when you're playing poorly yourself.
Yeah, I would definitely doubt that they would have enough to make it to that 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. But speaking of Reggie Jackson, he was cleared for light running and shooting and continuing ankle strengthening exercises in his rehab from his sprained ankle, which he sprained on December 26th of last calendar year at the Indiana Pacers. So a little bit of progress made by Reggie Jackson, but still no timetable for his return.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to be able to give you a definite date. It's obviously a longer recovery period than they had initially thought when he incurred the injury, but those sprained ankles, they can be quick or they can take a long time. And this is one of those that's going to take a long time. He's ditched the walking boot and he's now cleared for light running, but light running isn't playing NBA basketball at full speed. So I just don't think that he's going to be back in the near future. Could be another week or two before he's even cleared to play full-on, full-court basketball. He's going to have to get back into game shape. He's going to have some practices under his belt. And the Pistons right now are very desperate for him to come back and bolster the front court, or the back court. And I don't know if he's going to be enough from when he comes back, because they don't have a lot of time for him to work his way into the rotation and slowly get back into the flow of things. They need him to be 100%, and they need him to do it the first time he steps on the floor. So it's going to be very interesting to see when he's actually recovered, what type of minutes he gets, what situations he's played in, because they need somebody like him in the backcourt, and they just don't have anybody right now that can match what he was able to bring. For all his faults, I would still take him over what they have now in a heartbeat, and it's going to be very tough for them to just throw him to the Lions and put him in there for 35-40 minutes coming off of that sprained ankle, because that's not something you can just jump out of a recovery and go right back into playing that many minutes. So it's going to be interesting when he's able to finally get onto the court and have some practices and some scrimmages under his belt, get a better idea of what he's able to bring. But this is not something that, even though he's healed, whenever that happens, he's not just going to go right back to 100% and be the same player that he was before he hurt his ankle. So an injury that was unfortunate, obviously, for the Pistons, but at this point you can't make any excuses. There's some other things that are going on, regardless of Reggie Jackson's injury, that they need to fix. And you mentioned one of those, the center spot, especially the backup to Andre Drummond. They don't really have one, and that's really hurt them in this last stretch of games.
Well, so there you go. I would say don't rush it. Just wait till he's 100% and make sure that too. It's probably not. It's probably going to be another non-playoff season for the Pistons in totality. The way they're playing as of late, the way the Reggie Jackson, the very long duration of the Reggie Jackson sprained ankle injury. And it depends on how badly it's sprained. And clearly we can tell by waiting so long that it's a very badly sprayed ankle.
Right, and when you're talking about a basketball player, I mean, any sort of athletic endeavor, but in basketball, sprained ankle, I mean, he's going to need to be as close to 100% as possible before he's really able to be effective. And it's going to be tough for him to get back and jump right into the flow. So it's not something, he's not going to come and save them. He's not going to come and start knocking down 20 points and 10 assists every game. He's going to have to work his way in. And I just don't know if they have the time for him to get back into the flow. And it'll be interesting to see his usage once he's able to get back into the lineup from Stan Van Gundy's standpoint. How much does he use him? Who else does he use in tandem with him? Because their backcourt's a mess right now. And, it's something that even if they were able to get it fixed, I don't know if they have enough time to make up the ground that they've lost with the bad stretches of play that they've had over the course of the season.
I would doubt they would. So, that's Pistons talk. Now we transition from basketball to hockey and the Red Wings. Well, the Red Wings have chosen to be a mediocre team once again. After losing to the Nashville Predators 3-2 in regulation, they get a point in an overtime loss at home to the Buffalo Sabres on an overtime goal with 0.2 of a second left by Marco Scandella. And then on Saturday night, they play a really struggling Hurricanes team as of late, 3-1 in regulation at home. And then they go into the Big Apple in Madison Square Garden in New York City and play the New York Rangers, and they beat them in overtime, 3-2. They relinquish a 2-goal lead, but Trevor Daley, of all players, tipping in the game-winning goal with less than 6 seconds left in overtime, which is amazing to me. But the Rangers have lost 6 straight going into that game, and now they suffered an overtime loss, which they've got a point. But the Red Wings climbed up to 62 points, 26, and 10. The Panthers have 62 points as well, 25, and 6. That gives the Panthers the ownage of the tiebreaker right there in points. The Rangers 60 points, 27, 30, and 6. But the Red Wings only 5 points away from that wild card spot, but they have 3 teams ahead of them that they are trailing behind Columbus, the Blue Jackets.
Yeah, that's a Rangers team that's clearly in a selling mode. Obviously trading Rick Nash to the Bruins and looking to make more moves as the trading deadline comes up here on Monday. This is something that when you look at the Rangers, that 60 points is a little bit of a mirage. They were 5-16 in their last 21 games. They didn't even have any overtime losses or shootout losses. They were just bad. They were 5-16 heading into tonight over the last 21 games. They're in a clearly sell now mode, and the Red Wings had to struggle to beat them. Had a goal taken away on an offsides call after a review that was clearly offsides after they showed the overhead view.
Just barely, but clearly.
And then the Rangers had a goal disallowed after Zibanejad kicked one in. So all of that means is that the Red Wings went to overtime and got the winner's point with a Trevor Daley goal. But again, you look at this Red Wings team, 26, 26, and 10. They have a lot of teams to jump. They are solidly 8 points behind Columbus for that second playoff spot. Columbus is buying right now, although they are rumored to be looking to move Jack Johnson and seeing what the market is for him. Mike Green for the Detroit Red Wings is obviously one of the targets for trade rumors on the Red Wings side. Luke Glendening has also been rumored, and there are some reports that a team offered a fifth-round pick for him, and the Red Wings declined to make that trade. Not hearing that from anybody specifically, but if that were to be the case, it doesn't make a lot of sense for the Red Wings to hold on to him, because at this point, you're not making the playoffs, and if a team is going to give you something for nothing, you might as well take it. And again, just shows Ken Howland's reluctancy to make moves that really just are screaming to be made. And for the Red Wings, same old story, is they're going to hold it close to the vest. They're not going to get great return for the guys that they have, and then they're going to miss the playoffs, end up in a bad spot in the lottery, and we'll see what happens from there. So, really at this point it just becomes a watch as to what trades Detroit is willing to make and will make. Having moved Mrazek earlier, I don't see any reason for them to hold on to Mike Green, because he's going to be an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. And there are teams that are in the market for defensemen. And if the Rangers can get for Rick Nash what they got, you would think that Mike Green would be able to fetch a pretty decent price from somebody. But with his injury and his lack of playing time over the last week, there's some teams that could be scared off, or at least not willing to give them the price they were willing to a couple weeks ago. So it'll be very interesting to see on the NHL trade deadline what's going to happen. I just don't think the Red Wings have any players that really should be untouchable unless their names are Larkin, Athanasiou, and Mantha. They should be exploring every single opportunity they have to make a move and see if they can gather picks and perhaps prospects for whatever they have on their roster.
Yeah, and that's mediocrity, folks, in its entirety. But speaking of trades, the Red Wings traded Petr Mrazek to the Philadelphia Flyers for a conditional 2018 fourth-rounder and a 2019 conditional third-rounder a day after our last episode, which retained half of Mrazek's salary, and that loses money for Ken Holland and Chris Ilitch. Just partially good, partially bad, I would say.
Yeah, I mean they've had some limited success, but I mean in today's NHL, if you're not first, you're last, and if you're not going to make the playoffs, there's no reason to stick around in the race, especially when you're the type of team the Detroit Red Wings are, which they don't rip off wins on a consistent basis. So they're not going to be one of those teams that rips off 13 or 14 out of 20 and jumps a whole heck of a lot of teams. So when you look at what they have for a schedule, who they have playing, I just don't see a reason why they're not being more aggressive in the trade deadline front, except for they're run by Ken Holland, who seems very reluctant to make any sort of deal on players that he really likes for some reason. So, other than Mike Green, I just don't see anybody else being moved. I could be surprised, but I just wouldn't be very shocked at all to see Mike Green and then nobody else be traded after the trade deadline.
Mm-hmm. Then we got this article, a new one, earlier today from Jeff Moss, the founder and editor-in-chief of the Detroit Sports Rag. F. Pavel Datsyuk is what it's headlining. Currently, we can follow him on Twitter at DetSportsRag. Jeff Moss is real other Twitter handle, Jeff Moss DSR, is still suspended for an extended span of time for some reason. Maybe because Twitter wanted something deleted from that Twitter handle of his. But anyhow, Jeff Moss scouted this comment from Pavel Datsyuk. Quote, gold medal means more than Stanley Cup titles, unquote. This is a quote that doesn't, like, as you pointed out, that is not only about Pavel Datsyuk, but it's about other players that compete for the Olympic gold medal from the NHL, like Alexander Ovechkin, like you mentioned.
We talked a little bit about this off air before today's episode, and on the face, it doesn't seem like a great comment coming from Pavel Datsyuk, knowing the history of what he did as far as signing a contract and then immediately wanting to go back to Russia after he had signed that contract, and then leaving as he did that team in a lurch by going back to Russia with 1 year remaining on his contract, which then made Ken Holland feel that he needed to trade that dead cap money in order to compete, which cost them Jacob Chikrin. And then he goes out with the Russian team and they beat Germany in overtime for the gold medal. And he's talking about how it means more to him than the Stanley Cup wins that he had in 2002 and 2008. That all said, I mean, if you're looking at Russia, they tend to be a little bit different as far as the players are concerned when it comes to winning gold medals. They are a little bit more loyal to their country. Alexander Ovechkin was talking about leaving the Capitals to come play in the Olympics, even though the NHL teams and players were forbidden from going there, and it took some talking with ownership of the Washington Capitals to convince him that he was not going to go do that. It has nothing to do with Alexander Ovechkin not caring about the Washington Capitals, not winning the Stanley Cup, but the Russians are bred that way. They are bred to put country first. They are bred to bring glory and medals to Russia. They're not made to win Stanley Cups. And even though their times have changed and there are a lot more Russians in the NHL now than there were 20, 30 years ago, that fact still remains that the Russian players that come over to the NHL still have an intense tie to how their national team does. And for Pavel Datsyuk to make that comment, whether or not that it makes a lot of sense, especially since they were beating a bunch of teams that had nobody on them, there's still some credence to the fact that it does mean a lot to those Russian players to win the gold medal because of the fact that they are able to represent their country in the Olympic Games. That doesn't mean that Pavel Datsyuk's comments shouldn't go without any scrutiny, because they indeed should, and the events that surrounded his leaving the Detroit Red Wings and the subsequent events that happened after that, that's the kind of stuff that
Go on.
To defend him by saying, well, he was great in Detroit. He did all this stuff. What did he do in Detroit, really? He won some Selkies. He won basically one Stanley Cup where he was actually the focal point of the team. The 2002 team, he was on the fourth line, a rookie at that time. He was not a big contributor to that team. So when you look at his career over the whole span of his time in Detroit, he didn't bring home a ton of hardware other than Selke trophies and 2 Stanley Cups. And like I said, one of those Stanley Cups he was a minor player in. So that kind of comment just basically goes to show that Pavel Datsyuk doesn't really care about his success in the NHL. He didn't care about his success when he was with the Wings. He didn't care about anything but what he was going to get and the contracts he was able to earn. If you remember in 2014, when he was playing in Sochi, the week before, he was too hurt to play for Detroit. He couldn't play. Mike Babcock even expressed a lot of doubt that he was going to play in the Olympics because of his injury. But yet he managed to suit up for Team Russia and go play in Sochi. That just shows the type of ties they have when it comes to international play. And as far as the Russian players are concerned, that's their golden goose. That's what they hang their hat on. They don't look at NHL Stanley Cups or NHL awards. They look at international play, and that's how they are viewed in the lens of their country. They're not looked at as heroes for winning Stanley Cups. They're looked at by winning world championships and gold medals in international play.
Exactly. The Stanley Cup and the gold medal in the Olympics are two different ultimate prizes. And that's as far as the debate between those two ultimate prizes is concerned, that's going to be one of our 5 questions. Red Wings continue their road trip at St. Louis, Winnipeg, Minnesota, and Boston a week from Tuesday before heading back home. So, one last team to cover, and that's the Detroit Tigers.
That one is long gone.
As they enter preseason baseball, they have signed free agent veteran left-handed starting pitcher Francisco Liriano to a 1-year, $4 million contract. And clearly, it was actually just a Ron Gardenhire recruit, because Liriano has had experience with Gardenhire in the past for the Minnesota Twins the past decade.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting signing just because there's not been a lot of free agent movement in Major League Baseball due to some say it's collusion, others say it's a slow market. There's a lot of guys that are still without contracts right now. Francisco Liriano goes to the Tigers. He knows Ron Gardenhire from his days in Minnesota. Francisco Liriano was actually a big Tiger killer back when he and Gardenhire were in Minnesota. Obviously, Liriano, not nearly the pitcher he once was, even though he was a member of the Astros last year and ended up being a part of that World Series winning team. I think the one thing that you can look at as a positive for this is it's an audition. The Tigers are not projected to be anywhere near good. And if Liriano can come in and show some worth and some value, maybe the Tigers can use him as a trade chip when it comes to July 31st and get something for him. So they're hoping what they do is they pay $4 million for a guy that can bring them a decent return when it comes to July, because they're not going to need to hold on to him because they're not going to be in the middle of any sort of pennant race. And all Liriano can do is kind of run this show-me contract and see what he's able to do. And I think that's the one positive you have to look at it under the lens of the Tigers is it's a no-risk signing because they're not supposed to be any good. And if indeed Liriano has somewhat of a renaissance and pitches well, they can use him as a trade chip and get something in return for him at the end of the season.
Yeah, I'm thinking of it as a trade bait strategy that the Tigers could devise for Francisco Liriano. They just have to hope that he clicks for the first half of the MLB season in 2018.
Right. I mean, you got to remember, you look at him, you think he's older than dirt. Well, he kind of is in Major League Baseball years. He's 34, but he's been in the major leagues for a long time, and people know what type of pitcher he is. He's well-traveled, and there's a lot of teams willing to take on a chance of a guy who's left-handed, can come out of the bullpen, and has some stuff. And $4 million is a pittance when you're talking about the bloated salaries of today's baseball players. So I don't think it's a terrible move. I just think that a lot of people have some apprehensive thoughts towards it because you're adding a guy that now is going to be taking away some innings from younger players who they need to develop. But in the bullpen, they really don't have a whole lot there. And so I don't think he's really stealing anybody's spot, per se. So I kind of like the move, and we'll get to that here in the later segments. But at this point, Liriano being signed for $4 million is one of the least of the Tigers' worries.
That's going to be in our What's Your Grade segment. So, first off, we have our 5 questions segment.
It's time for 5 questions on the Michigan Sports Truth.
Question number 1. Will Miles Bridges be allowed to play for the rest of the season from the Big Ten tournament to the end of the NCAA tournament? I'd say yes.
Yeah, I think that he's out of the woods as far as the FBI investigation is for now. Unless some more information comes out, I think that he shouldn't have any problem with being able to play unless the new information surfaces. But I think this was just something that is a little bump in the road for him to undergo. And he shouldn't have any eligibility problems here on out. Most people believe that he is going to be done after this year, that he will enter the NBA draft. So even if there were some lingering after effects in the off season, he'll be going to the NBA, and Michigan State will be left to pick up the pieces if there's anything that comes of his interactions with the folks from that agency, that sports agency, and Christian Dawkins.
Next question.
Question number 2. What teams have the best chances of winning the MAC tournament later on?
Well, if we're talking about Michigan teams, I think right now, just the way that they're playing, Eastern Michigan probably has the best chance to make some noise in the MAC tournament. Steve Hawkins and his Western Michigan Broncos. Hawk's been a long-time coach at Western. He's been a successful coach at Western. He knows how to coach in March. I don't know if he's got the horses necessarily this year, but coaching is a very big part of the NCAA tournament and your conference tournament as well. If you're looking at the odds, I still think they're Eastern's favorite just because of the way they're playing, but I think it's going to be between those two teams. Central, unfortunately, just the way that they've played defense at times this year, you can't not play defense and expect to go far in any sort of tournament play, and they've just had too many struggles on that end for me to think that they have any sort of chance of making a run.
Defense is the name of the game. But as far as the teams outside the state, like Toledo, not Northern Illinois, they're in last place, but Toledo and Buffalo.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at the seeding, obviously it's going to be coming down to them. When you talk about conference tournaments, though, like I said, it only takes one team to get hot, and even if they're not in a good spot to begin with, they get a couple wins under the belt, they get some confidence, and things start rolling. That's what makes college basketball tournaments great. It's not necessarily watching the top teams roll over opponents. It's watching the underdogs come up big. And I think that right now Toledo and Buffalo are obviously in the driver's seats, but that doesn't mean somebody can't make a run.
Next question.
Question number 3. Is Reggie Jackson's future return going to be enough to lift the Pistons to a playoff push? I would say no, just to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, unless he comes back at 100% and playing the type of game that he was prior to that injury against the Indiana Pacers, I just don't see the Pistons getting him back in any sort of shape that they're able to make a run with him at the point, especially since we don't know when he's going to come back. It's obviously not going to be this week. It probably won't be next week. So you're looking at the second week of March where he's able to come back. And there's only so many games in the NBA season. And each game that he misses, Pistons have to fight for without him. And the way that they're playing right now, if they keep playing the way they are, they're not going to be in contention for a playoff spot by the time he does return.
Next question.
Question number 4. Will the Red Wings keep Jared Coro as a backup goalie after the Mrazek trade, or do they look for a backup goalie in the offseason and send Coro back down?
Well, I mean, Coro's not waiver exempt. He has made it through waivers before. I don't know if when you look at the Red Wings, it's going to really depend on what their roster construction is. For all intents and purposes, Ken Howard is looking at not coming back. So it's going to depend on who's in that GM's office. and what they decide to do with the team. If you're looking at making a full rebuild and actually going through that process and trying to get the team back to where they were, I don't think Jared Carreau is your guy. If it's Ken Holland or somebody that shares his thoughts of trying to stay competitive, and I put that in air quotes, maybe they do keep him. He's been in the system for a long time. I don't think there's anybody that's really going to go out and steal him at this point of his career. So I think the options for him are going to be either A, the backup goalie for the Detroit Red Wings, or B, he's going to be let go and probably test his wares at the free agent market. I don't know if him playing in Grand Rapids is going to be any sort of advantage at this point, simply because they've got some younger guys that are coming up through the system, and again, it hinges on who's going to be in that GM's chair come the summer of 2018. What decision is made?
Mm-hmm.
Next question.
And question number 5, which prize is more important in hockey, the Stanley Cup or the Olympic gold medal?
Well, that's a very good question. It also depends on who you're talking to. If you're talking to somebody that doesn't have a realistic shot at the NHL, if you're talking to somebody that doesn't have a chance to win a Stanley Cup, then the gold medal is by far the biggest prize. But if you're talking to somebody who's tasted the NHL, talking to somebody who has had the opportunity to play even in the NHL playoffs or even in the NHL regular season, I think it would be the Stanley Cup, simply because that's the hardest trophy, in my mind, to win in professional sports. So when you're looking at a gold medal, that's a lot. It's a whole different scenario when you're talking about an Olympic gold medal. That's a short tournament. It's a 2-week tournament that's compressed and has a lot of things that can sway who gets in and who doesn't as far as the medal round. When you're talking about an NHL season, you're talking about a long grind. You're talking about over 100 games of hockey. And I just think that if you take those two things and put them together, an Olympic gold medal is a great honor. It's a great achievement. But I think the Stanley Cup is probably the most revered prize in hockey if you are somebody that has any sort of NHL aspiration. When you talk about people that are growing up playing hockey, somebody like my son, he doesn't think of winning an Olympic gold medal. He thinks of winning a Stanley Cup. And to me, the Stanley Cup is the bigger prize simply because there's a lot of sacrifice that goes into it. Not that there's not sacrifice going into winning an Olympic gold medal, but there's just there's a difference. And unless you've talked to somebody that has played for one or has won one, it's hard to appreciate that. So my answer, very long-winded to that question, is the Stanley Cup.
That's right. Stanley Cup's number one priority, as always. So that wraps up our 5 questions segment, and to our entire audience, if you want to answer those 5 questions, just replay that segment portion of this episode and answer them the best you can without going out of line. Now for the What's Your Grade segment.
Pencils down, everyone. It's time to find out what's your grade.
Got 2 events to grade. The Red Wings trading Petr Mrazek to the Flyers for 2 draft picks, first of all.
I give that one a B. The reason I'm going to give it a B is because it doesn't look like they were going to look to re-sign Petr Mrazek in the offseason. That's the only reason that you trade him at this point. Because if you had any thoughts of having him play for you past this season, you don't trade him. Because you don't have any guarantee of getting him back. He's still going to be a highly sought-after goalie in the free agent market. And they just didn't think that they were going to keep him on board. We could go into all of the things, and we have done it in previous episodes, of how the Red Wings have mismanaged his development and so forth. But I'm going to give it a B simply because if you're not going to use that asset, get something in return for it. And I think that they were able to get a fair return for what he was worth. He's going to be somebody that runs hot and cold. Right now he's running hot. And for them to get 2 draft picks for that, that's something that can be said for Ken Holland, is that he was able to get something They put him through waiver drafts and nobody claimed him. And that's something that still sticks in my mind when you talk about his trade value, because at the beginning of the season, nobody wanted him. Las Vegas did not pick him, even though he was left unprotected by the Detroit Red Wings, which was the first clue that Detroit didn't have him in their long-term plans. And then just the way that they deployed him this year, he wasn't being played in long stretches, even though his play was at or above where Jimmy Howard's was. And when you're talking about somebody, especially in the NHL, as a goalie, you need to play. You need to get into a rhythm if you're going to be a starter, and he just wasn't able to do that. So he goes to Philadelphia now, who has been besieged by injuries at the goalie position. He's probably going to be their number one guy down the stretch, and they're going to be making a playoff run. And they needed to make a deal, and they didn't give up a whole lot in return for Mrazek, but they gave up something that the Red Wings needed, which is picks. So that's why I'm going to give it a B.
Good grade. Then you got the Tigers signing Francisco Liriano.
I'm going to give that one an A-. I really like the signing, not because he's going to do anything for the Tigers per se, but if he's able to still prove that he can pitch effectively at the major league level coming out of the bullpen, there's a market for a guy who's left-handed, who's got an above-average fastball, has swing and miss stuff, and teams will readily pay somebody that has that type of stuff and that type of experience. And for $4 million, it's a relatively low-risk, high-reward signing. And again, you have to take it out of the lens of what he's going to be able to do for the Tigers, because they're going to be a bad team this year for all intents and purposes. So his job is to be good when he's called upon and perform well and be able to get them something in return at the trade deadline. So an A- for them basically investing $4 million in what they hope to be future picks and prospects.
Absolutely. Again, those three words, trade bait strategy, but we'll have to see how well he does prior to July 31st. So that's our What's Your Grade segment. So for our audience, if they have a grade for those two events each, post them in the comment bank in this episode, and please don't go out of line. That's episode 305 of the Week in Review. Before we sign off, we want to remind everyone to share this episode and our entire podcast on social media and have their friends share that as well, because we want to tell them that the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast is in search for a wider local audience that's fans of sports. So please spread the word about the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast and its Facebook page. Give it a like, give it a share with your friends and families. I'm Taylor Phillips. Follow me on Twitter at DT2Phillips and Buck Geno at Buck Geno III, and like and share the Michigan Sports Truth Facebook page. Buck, I'll talk to you next week on episode 306, and we'll talk to our audience next week on episode 306.
Very good.
Yep. Thanks very much for listening, downloading, and sharing TTFN. Ta-ta for now.
Bon appétit.
Mission complete.